Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ben.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
I just asked who's calling in under the 203 number.
Warwick.
Can you repeat
Commissioner
that?
Vance.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
They're asking who is about. Cisco to citizens. Voice check. Voice check.
Hello, 1, 2, can you hear me?
Sandra.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Weird noises.
Got you loud and clear, Ted.
You can hear me okay, Peter?
Hi.
Okay,
Loud and clear.
okay, who's Morag is here. Jill. I think we're all here. Did you receive just shortly here an application for a continuing ed course to be approved by CTR? Is anybody looking at there's nothing?
It's uploaded to the site with all the documents to the calendar listing.
Okay, I just got it a few minutes ago. Nobody got it?
Yeah, I emailed it to you directly, but for the purposes of the meeting, it's uploaded with all the documents on the calendar listing.
Okay, does everybody have it then? No. All right. Let's see here if I can get it. Remember? Get this up to the commissioners.
When did you send it? I don't have anything.
I didn't say anything.
No, it wasn't sent out. It was received yesterday and added to the group of documents on the calendar listing yesterday. So if you follow that link that Jen provided to all the documents, it's there with all of the documents.
It's the first document in that listing of documents.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's gonna have to be formally added to the agenda at some point, and
Yeah, I'll make
Julianne can assist with that.
Right. Okay, so I'm gonna have to be, I need a motion to add this to the meeting for today. So someone's gonna make a motion for the real estate pre-continuing education course to be considered.
I so move.
Second, anybody second?
Second, Commissioner Berquist.
Okay, okay. All right, so it's added to the meeting. All right, Happy New Year and good morning, everybody. Okay, the minutes for anybody have the time to review the minutes?
Move their adoption.
Second, Commissioner Ellis.
Is that a second, Ted? You're muted,
I'll
Ted.
second.
Who's seconded, Ted?
Ted, you're muted.
You're muted, Ted.
I seconded it, I thought.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. I have a copy. You have a copy of the complaints that came in? I had asked for, these are closed complaints. We were getting them at our meetings. It stopped, oh God, a long time ago. And I asked for it to come back again. And the main concern is we have, or we should have, is the fact is that what are the complaints of closing, and are they consistent of the same complaint over and over again? Did you get a chance? Everybody get a chance to look at it? You need a magnifying glass, by the way, to take a look at it. But did you get a chance to look at it? Okay, one of the things that came up compared to in the past, and I don't think we even got this since, God, Richard Mahoney left, retired. I want to know that's a few years ago. So one of the things I noticed is more management CAM complaints. Right, Pam? Pam?
Okay, I'm Pamela Brown, Director of Investigations, and I'm having a little difficult time hearing you, Ben. So I hear that there's a
Me too.
question
Me-
on the
me
floor
three.
regarding the,
You're very muffled, Ben.
Very
It's hard to
much.
understand you.
Yeah,
Yes.
it seems
And
like,
you're very clear now. I mean, not Ben, but you, the speaker.
okay. So at the very last minute, you probably by now have received a copy of the closed complaints for year 2022. All right, so
Yes.
this is just, I wanted to get you something, you had asked for it. It shows the cases that have been closed over the last year. All right, so when we started out in the beginning of the year, we had a very low volume of complaints. Of course, with the market being what it is, we got hit with a high volume. At the time, we had one examiner, you all know Jill Conklin, and she shepherded the entire unit, dealing with the complaints and getting teams up and running. So then we were able to get another position in, and we now have Mimi, I believe who you've all have met. So we have two examiners now. So the next time you meet, you will have a report that will be designed specifically for the Real Estate Commission Board to see what we have for closed complaints. You may get a little bit of information on open complaints, though we cannot share open complaints. It's not able to be disclosed to the public as they are open and being investigated, but we'll be able to share more information. I am working with IT to get something for you that you'll be receiving at the minutes. I understand it was brought to my attention that you haven't received reports since 2 directors ago, but you will get them for your next meeting.
okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about people who are being complained about? I've actually had agents reach out to me in the past when a consumer has filed a complaint to essentially try to talk to me about the complaint, and I'm not aware of it at all because it's probably at Jill's level or an examiner level and it hasn't come to us. What should I be saying to the person at that point? Just, you should be working through the DCP process, and if it gets to us, I'll see it then, but I can't really comment on it now. Is that how we
Yeah,
should
just
be
send them,
handling that?
yes, just send them to us because if you're not a party to the complaint, you wouldn't be getting all the
Right,
details
I don't
of the
know what,
complaint. it's
so they
best
try to
just-
tell me their story and, okay.
Yes, just
Okay.
have them cooperate with us. They need to send something to us in writing. They need to respond to the complaint. They get a letter that says, this is a copy of the allegations made against you. You have 10 days to send your written response in to us. So
Okay.
that's what we would like.
All right, thanks.
I think that's the questions that come up before on that. We really can't get involved in this in case it comes to a hearing. So you stop them and say, listen, you gotta go through the department. We can't make decisions. They look for us at time when they call and ask us to try to make a decision. We cannot do that.
Ben, you kind of sound like you're in an echo chamber.
I don't know. And it seems like only when I have a meeting, the DCP meetings. Let's see if I can lower here. Is that any better? Is that any better?
Talk to us.
Slightly.
I'm
yes.
not having any issues.
Okay.
I can hear you fine.
Okay, all right. So anyhow, we'll put this, so next meeting, we should have a more formal report then. All right, Ryan Burns.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe you had requested that I come and speak to the commission briefly just on the change to the mandatory course approval that you all have been involved in. There really isn't going to be a large change in how you do your business. It's just may change that the number of times you go through the process. So currently it's my understanding that UConn has put together a kind of proposed course in consultation with you that then you would approve, and that would be the mandatory course that would be taught kind of throughout the state for that period. Reviewing the statute and in consultation with your chairman, we've determined that it's really not, the commission nor the department is able to limit the course to a single provider to design the course. That if schools wanted to design their own mandatory course that covered the 3 topics within the statute, they could submit that to the department and to the commission for review and approval. So if a school wanted to design their own mandatory course, that may be submitted up through the department to you for approval in the future. And that's just something that we wanted to make you all aware of, as that's not something that you've had experience with previously.
Are we talking about just brokerage or CAM also?
So these I would have to check on CAM, but this is the real estate mandatory course that we've been focusing on.
So just so you know, with CAM, the only school that is it has to be through Connecticut CAI. That's their equivalent of NAR, and that presents a number of issues.
Yeah, I will. This was not about CAM. I will review those statutes, and if there's an issue, I'll come back to you. But this discussion was merely about the real estate licensees.
Okay.
So Peter, if I may, the community association manager regulations still are not effective at this point, and that would be governing any course outside of that one nationally approved course. So information related to continuing education for CAMs will be forthcoming.
I don't follow you. What the current regulation is it's got to be CAI, and that's so what you're saying is that's going to be changed, or I don't follow you.
So the statutes. The statutes say that they had to be a nationally recognized course or a equivalent, and the commissioner had to promulgate regulations on this. And so those regulations are currently pending through the system. So those will add additional clarity on what other comparable courses may be acceptable.
So we're talking about
But that's
Yes,
for the
I know
community
it says,
association.
it does say or national equivalent for original licensing, I believe, but we're talking about continuing ed. It's going to say something similar is what you're saying. Thank you. That's great.
Can I just clarify something? So the course that the education committee goes over with UConn and everyone else that's on that, and that they come up with and that's approved by the commission, all schools have the right to teach that course, correct? They are given that PowerPoint or
Yes.
PDF or whatever, and they can all just use that.
Well, if it's disseminated by UConn to them, so a slight kind of behind the scenes shift is currently it has been DCP disseminating that course, but it's really not appropriate for the department to be disseminating course materials. So if another institution wants to teach the mandatory course that was approved, that was developed by UConn, they could work with UConn, teach that approved course, and it wouldn't have to go back through you. But
Okay.
yes.
And they don't have to pay any money for that or anything. That course material is just free to all approved schools. Is that correct?
That would be between the schools and UConn. I don't believe that there's any intent for UConn to change their policy of providing that for free.
Okay.
There is another alternative also. Sorry, when you're
So,
done.
all right. So one other question then. So if a, real estate school ABC decides that they want to create their own content based on the approved coursework, we then are just reviewing, the department, and then the commission has to review that course on kind of a rolling basis for that 2-year period.
Yeah, I'd have to review the timing when it came in, but yeah, it would be a review of a completely new course, correct?
Okay.
Just a quick comment about that is that, so there are other providers. So, and I know this because I do have a real estate school. One of many is an outfit called Deerfield. And all you do is you pay for the booklets that you give your students, and they give you the entire presentation to give to DCP, including a whole PowerPoint. And it makes it really easy for DCP or whoever, whatever state it is, because it's very standard and it's very clear. And what's great is if a lot of teachers are using the same, whether it's Deerfield or one of their competitors, the people who are reviewing it, they've seen this a million times. So it's very easy for them to put a stamp of approval on it. And I do like that, that there are multiple options. We can use the UConn, we can use Deerfield or a competitor, we can make our own. And I think that there are multiple options.
So then DCP would have to review these because they have to have, based on the statute.
Correct.
Yeah, we have to review everything and approve that
Because
class
they-
again, presumably to
DCP
make sure
does
it's the
have to
same
review
content.
it. Correct. However, with the Deerfield, you're almost getting fast tracked because the DCP is going to see it anyhow. If you got 20 different schools who are sending in the same Deerfield stuff, it makes it easy for DCP. They're going to be reviewing it one way or the other.
Jill Conklin, Peter, I think you mean Dearborn, right? Not
Thank you.
Deerfield, right?
You're right.
Dearborn?
Thank you.
Yeah. So if I can say, Jill Conklin, I'm a real estate examiner here at DCP. Ryan, the mandatory course subject is usually a chosen, like right now, our current one is CT Real Estate Agency Law. So it deals with agency law. So if somebody else was going to submit a mandatory course for a cycle, wouldn't it have to be that same course because there is one mandatory course for each cycle that the education committee puts together in conjunction with UConn?
Yeah, so the education committee isn't going to be driving this process as much as it had been. There are 3 topics within the statute that are covered by the mandatory course as required. As long as the course covers those mandatory topics, it's something that could be submitted for approval.
So there would be different mandatory courses for each cycle with different names, even though there's only one mandatory due? Because
That is possible, correct.
The past, it's always been this is the mandatory, this is the name of the course, and that's the course. And last cycle, we did have a school come forward and have their own course, but it carried that same name and that same course content.
Right, so this is the shift that I've been talking about. That is not necessarily how it's going to be going forward.
So how do we audit that agents have taken the mandatory courses? Like quickly audit it. If you have, 17 names of a class that's been approved.
I would have to go back and speak with licensing, but there will be a way within our internal tracking for them to note which class was the class that fulfills their mandatory requirement.
Okay.
I think the licensees would be really confused with that, knowing, because that's a common email, common question. What's the mandatory?
So again, it's based on the subject matter that's been approved. But I think internally for processing purposes on the investigation side, Jill, if you want to hold your questions and talk to Ryan afterwards about implementation, that's probably going to be the best way to handle this.
Sure.
Thank you.
I just wanted to let you guys know there's a public member that has their hand raised. I don't know if you want her to speak or not, but.
Let me just say one second. So let me understand. So anyone can, any school can submit their class as long as it has the ingredients, let's call it, of the mandatory courses in it, and it will be accepted?
Yeah, they can submit it for approval, and then it would go through an initial review by DCP staff, and then it would be submitted to you for final approval. And by you, I mean the commission.
So DCP would approve it. It would not have to go to another educational commission, meeting, and what?
No, so it would go through the department and then through the commission. So the commission would have the final word on whether or not it was an appropriate mandatory course.
And to clarify, the two courses that are on the agenda today, including the one you just added earlier, are being requested for consideration as alternate mandatory courses.
I think one of these courses does not pertain to us. Somehow it got into our agenda. It belongs to the appraisal commission.
That is the course that was sent earlier this morning was a course on fair housing. So that was a CE4. That was CE.
The one we got, the one we received on the agenda was the appraisal facts and myths, which should be going to the appraisal commission, not the real estate commission. You follow me? Now we just accepted, made a motion to review CTR's fair housing. Okay. It's on the agenda.
Okay, yeah, I see you're referring to the course that was the previous course, the earlier course.
Right. The course that came in on the agenda we got yesterday was appraisal facts and myths. It was by Terry Hastings. That really should be going to the appraisal commission.
I believe, no, I don't know if anyone is here, one of the public attendees is here regarding that course that might be able to clarify. If there's someone here representing
I don't think
course, could you?
Are you sure it wouldn't be a real estate course, Ben? Because there are a number of appraisal classes that agents can take.
Somewhere it says mandatory course for consideration. Appraisal is a mandatory course?
For a broker, it is.
Is it classroom hours and current real estate and fair housing legislation, licensing laws and regulation? I don't think it's part of that. I don't know. And Terry's not here?
I don't see Terry as an attendee, but if someone is here representing this course, if you could please raise your hand or put a comment in the question and answer area.
I'd like to table that and maybe look at it next time, only because I've got some questions on it. It's right here. Do we know what this contains then? Has anyone reviewed this from the department?
No, when it comes in and it's listed to be, be considered as mandatory, we forward it to this commission for review.
So what do we know what it contains? In reference to mandatory. How are we gonna know?
On the application, it looks like a pretty simple form when it comes through. But actually, a lot of the documents are hyperlinks in there. So if you click on the information on there, it'll show you kind of the substance of the application.
Well, then we'll have to do that because we've got to find out what we're approving. So we'll table that, so we get a chance, because I'm not sure what this course contains. I don't think anybody here really can explain to us what this course consists of. Am I correct? Joanne?
I think, Jay, that document was sent out to everyone and the hyperlinks are active, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So I think it would just be a matter of the members reviewing the application together to be able to determine whether or not that is the substance that you would typically approve for a course.
We have to, that takes time to go through the course. Okay. It would be nice next time if we can get these in a little earlier than normal. This was like the last, everything was like last second.
Do we all need to go through that, or do we want to have a subcommittee or one, how does that typically work?
Well, I think we can have a chance to, at our next meeting, we can discuss it.
Thank you.
We'll have to review it. All of it.
Ben, I have a question on a previous topic. Well, it's the same topic, I guess. Ryan, could you explain the rationale or behind these multiple names for the courses?
What do you mean multiple names? You mean the fact that multiple different schools can offer different courses? That would be, and why the change is happening?
With different names attached. That's my understanding is what you're saying?
Sure, they can call it whatever they like. It's not so much that we think it's something that should be good. There's really just no way for us to prevent a school from applying to teach a mandatory course and call it whatever they want and teach, a different curriculum that would also be in compliance. So it's more, it seems we've been unduly limiting the courses previously, and now we're trying to bring the practice in compliance with the law.
Is there anything preventing us from having names for our own purposes?
Could you explain that a little further?
So, you might call the class the Ryan Burns class, but we would internally call that, because it meets the criteria of the appraiser's factor fiction. So we call that AKA appraiser's factor fiction. And that way on our database, when people upload whatever, it goes under appraiser fact and fiction, regardless of the name that you've chosen.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, we could absolutely. I'm sure if internally we'll have a way to track these, whether it's giving names or having a different flag on them. That's not something I'm particularly concerned about, but I can look into it and report back if it's something that you have concerns about.
Not only internally, perhaps even externally, because I think Linda's point, and it's a good point, is that with the multiple names, I think Amy alluded to this too, it could lead to confusion. People need to know that the Ryan Burns class satisfies XYZ.
Sure. Yeah, they would. I can look into that and get back to you.
The course listing.
Why we can't have an umbrella name. The different courses can have their course identification, the class, the companies. But why can't we as a department have an umbrella name for that, so it's easily identified by the agents? It's going to be very confusing for agents. They're not going to know what course to take or not to take.
Well, on the course listing right now, currently, there's a column that says, mandatory year, like what year it satisfies. So it's clear which courses are, satisfy the mandatory requirement. Or at least it appears to me that it's clear, but if it's not, please let us know. I can share the screen if you'd like, just so you can see what I'm referencing here.
We have had in the past, though, it says the school says mandatory.
right here, this is mandatory year column, and you can see these two courses right here are both versions. They're both the Connecticut Real Estate Agency law that's been previously approved that UConn developed, but you can see that those are both 2024 courses.
Well, where does it say mandatory? Does it say mandatory?
The column says mandatory, so it tells you which year that course is mandatory for.
Let us take a look internally on the best ways to communicate to the agents if there's multiple mandatory courses. And we'll report back to you at the next meeting.
All right.
So, all right, so while you guys were talking, I clicked through Terry's document, and it is a class for real estate agents and brokers. Like the certificate says it's an agent and broker class, not an appraiser class. There is a broken link for the ad for it in the document the DCP has provided to us. I can't get one of the documents to open, but can we just confirm that for the next meeting, we all need to review both Terry's document and CTR's document for these classes? Or are we approving both of them today? I just want to make sure we've added the CTR one to the agenda for today. Is that getting approved today, even though we haven't reviewed it, or are we going to have time to review it?
Again, I don't see how we're going to review if we don't know the contents.
Okay, so then I would just.
We'd have to review it before we can approve it. Everybody agree?
Yes, I agree. And then if we could just check to make sure that like all the links are working, because on Terry's, there is one I cannot get to open. So I think we should be like clicking on all the links and making sure everything works so we can review everything completely. And I don't know if we should all be reviewing these or a subset of us, but if we could agree to that too, so we can definitely act on these the next meeting.
Yeah. Also, we got to get clarified. Is this Terry wants this to be a mandatory course, or does he's trying to just get the course approved? There's a difference because of what we're going to be. So we'll get that straightened out too. Everybody follow me?
Right. If it's a mandatory course, the commission has to approve it, correct? Versus if it's just a course for credits, the commission never sees those.
Correct.
But when you got a course that says mandatory and it says appraisal facts, it doesn't tell me that it's got all the substance in there to make it a mandatory course.
All right. So, but for the 2022 to 2024 cycle, the commission has already approved the mandatory course, correct?
Right.
So Terry shouldn't be able to add an additional mandatory class at this point. Is that correct? Or is the commission not allowed to determine mandatory courses anymore?
Ryan, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not that the commission determines the mandatory course. It approves a course to meet the mandatory requirements, but you can approve multiple courses to meet the mandatory requirements. So you determine the mandatory requirements, but there can be multiple courses that meet those. And so far you've approved one, which is the UConn.
So we can approve them during the cycle.
Okay. But then I would argue that Terry's course on appraisal only does not meet the requirements of the mandatory class that we've already approved. Like, because there's 3 separate sections, at least in that, where there's buyer agency, there's law, and whatever else, fair housing. So I mean, can we just say at this point then that it's clearly not mandatory because it leaves out all of the things that we had said as mandatory previously?
Well, we don't know what this appraisal facts and myths. What does it include? I don't know.
There's a public member who's wishing to speak.
Okay.
Um,
Go ahead.
It's Cindy then.
Okay, Cindy, you're unmuted.
Can you?
Hi. So under the last cycle, we had this issue before, which is I had also believed that the one course that was approved racial bias in real estate would be the only course. And then another provider provided a course with substantially different content. It included service dogs and all sorts of other topics that were not what we had submitted. And what Ryan is saying is exactly what was determined when the other course was approved, which is you can have a course with substantially different content during the same time period, and you can have multiples that are approved. I was not aware of that until those emergency meetings that you all did at the end of the last cycle that did approve an alternate course under a different name with substantially, I mean, it had some content that was the same, but others that weren't. And even the course that's approved right now is called Agency Law for Real Estate, and only 14% of the course covers agency. There's 40 minutes on audio video surveillance, and there's real estate teams for 30 minutes. So, I mean, it's a mixture of 8 different topics. It's not an agency course. Agency is one 25-minute portion of a 180-minute course. We didn't see fair housing in there at all. So that's why we decided, CTR decided to develop a fair housing course. It is the dominant call that we get on our legal hotline. And so we're suggesting that DCP should have a fair housing course that does cover fair housing laws. It covers how agents work with fair housing, and it covers the topics that are most common related to fair housing. But what Ryan explained to you is consistent with what we experienced, with what we thought the earlier position of the commission was, which is one course, everyone has to follow this course, there aren't multiple names. We thought we had to make the course available to anyone, and Ryan gave the same answer today that he gave to us. It's no, the school can decide who gets to teach the mandatory course. If you all approve it for mandatory, it can still be up to the school if they want 1 instructor or 10, because I was very surprised during the last cycle when all of these questions came up that they did before. And the answer was the same that Ryan's getting today, which is the topics don't provide the opportunity to limit. I guess you could, I mean, you could say courses aren't approved, but are they not approved because they don't meet the criteria in the statute? Anyway, we submitted it today because we believe fair housing is missing, unless we're counting buyer love letters as fair housing component. The sole section related to fair housing, and a course called Agency Law for Real Estate. So we believe a fair housing course should be mandatory. We believe it should be available now. And we're not suggesting it, that it can be an alternate course. It doesn't need to be standalone, but we very specifically are requesting it. If you don't approve it today, then it's not available until May. In the last cycle, you did emergency meetings. Granted, a lot of members probably won't take it until 2024, but it's why we submitted it.
I think the confusion is going to be is that people have taken the CT real estate agency law, and on the assumption they've satisfied the mandatory. Now, what you're saying is that you want fair housing by itself as a mandatory course?
Nope, we're submitting it as an alternate, as Ryan explained. This is being submitted as an alternate course to a course called Agency Law for Real Estate.
Okay, so what's the name of this course going to be?
This course is Current Topics in Fair Housing. And it covers race, sexual orientation, and gender identity or expression, which are protected classes we've had more than a decade that are rarely taught, but it's still a protected class for housing purposes. Lawful source of income, everything about service dogs. And then we have a new voluntary fair housing document that people can give to sellers or landlords that would be reviewed as part of the course to start the conversation early so people know they can't discriminate. It includes an acknowledgement that someone would sign. But it is a fair housing course, and it's developed around all of the legal hotline calls that we get. These are the areas we get the most calls about. But the agency law class, again, it's called agency law, but agency is only 25 minutes of the 180 minutes of the course.
Is your course going to have agency?
Well, I mean, it's included because we talk about what agents need to do. It doesn't say how to be a designated broker, or how to be, I mean, it doesn't talk about dual agency versus versus the other areas. But frankly, our bias course didn't the last cycle either. I mean, we've had mandatory courses that didn't cover agency in the past. And this course, the current course that's approved doesn't cover fair housing. Unless you count buyer love letters as fair housing, but that it's not illegal to do a buyer love letter. It's just cautionary on what those can include. But there's not a fair housing component to the currently approved mandatory course, which is what drove us to create one.
So your course is gonna, besides the fair housing and focus on fair housing, what it's going to be, what other, is it gonna be licensing laws and regulations?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. I mean, do we know what the time is? How much time?
Yeah. Then there's a complete timed outline that goes through the entire 180 minutes. It's attached.
Okay. No, we don't have that one.
It's one of the links in the PDF document. All those links are active for the most part. So you can, it opens up a Word document for you.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, the course you already approved is 25 minutes on agency, escalation clauses, love letters, surveillance, licensees, teams, and advertising. Not fair housing. Unless we're counting buyer love letters for that. Ryan, does the statute say it has to include all of them or that it should include those topics? What does the statute say?
I can pull up the statute specifically. It's just going to take me a quick second because I
It
don't
says one
want to
course
speak.
consisting of at least 3 classroom hours in current real estate and fair housing legislation, licensing laws, and regulations. I think we're gonna need some time to take a look at this.
Yeah, so if it's an and, then we would need to change it to have this course include. But I think the already approved course might need to be edited as well then.
Well, let's focus on your course, but I think we've got to look at these courses. The Terry Hastings course, what he's asking for, I have no idea what that consists of. I know he named it. I know he calls it, it's supposed to satisfy the mandatory course, but I don't know. Does anybody know that? So we need time to review this before we can approve
If I
it.
may, I know both Brian's looking up some more detail. The course content related to continuing education, typically the way that it's been structured in terms of having a required course is that it's in the regulations currently. And the regulations prescribe that you have to have brokers and salespersons take courses consisting of at least 12 classroom hours. And the following courses will be mandated. So it's one course of at least 3 classroom hours in current real estate and fair housing legislation, licensing laws, and regulations. So then the commission can approve, again, is unless otherwise directed by the real estate commission.
Or we can
One
approve it.
course is related to current real estate and fair housing legislation, licensing laws, and regulations. So you don't have, I mean, you're pretty broad brush to be able to define what, if you're going to change it from that requirement, what the 3-hour requirement would be.
Anybody want to add anything?
Sharon has her hand up.
Sharon?
I just never received the email. So, you know, I'd like to see the course before I vote to approve it. I haven't even received it, but that's, I've been going through my email and going through it and.
Sharon, so they didn't send attachments. They sent a meeting notice yesterday. And in the meeting notice calendar appointment, there's a link in there that goes to a calendar appointment system, which then has links to all the documents we should be using today. So this is the first time they've actually sent it to us that way. So if you got that meeting notification, it's in there.
It's in that top link, not the meeting. Okay.
Correct. It's the top link. So then it takes you to the state agency public meeting calendar. And then on that page, there's the agenda, and under the agenda is all the files we need for today's meeting. And
Okay.
this is the first time they've sent it to us
Yeah,
this way.
it's
So it's just not
thank
terribly
you.
clear. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Thanks so
and
much,
I did not
Amy.
get, I'm sorry. I did not get the last link. I'm looking at the agenda right now. And I did not get the link that we were supposed to have gotten today.
Yeah, and I would like to request that it gets sent to us sooner so that we really do have time to review everything.
Oh, I totally agree with you, Sharon. This last minute dump.
Easy. Yeah,
It cannot prepare us to be able to talk articulately at the meeting and with knowledge. It's ridiculous.
yeah, I agree, Linda. Thank you.
We're addressing that. There was, and I apologize for that. It was the last minute. So that's why I said before, so now we're being rushed or pushed to do this. My feeling is that if we need to have a special meeting, it gives us a chance to review this, take a few days or whatever, have a special, won't take us long, just say yes or no and do it. Okay, everybody agree?
Yes.
And I think we'll all
That's
feel
fine.
comfortable about it. I think we'll all feel welcome, don't you? All right, so let's make a motion just to table this till and have a special meeting. Motion,
I'll make a motion to table.
Second.
okay. Favor, all. All right, so we'll do is we'll review these and then I will contact all of you. And then when you feel comfortable about it, then we're gonna have a special meeting. It won't take long. Okay?
Yes.
So actually, we have reviewed the last day CTR. And we'll let you know, Cindy.
Yes, thanks very much. And in the event legal at DCP identifies that it must include it, we'll resubmit a changed outline. So I'll check with Ryan and Julianne after this to see if each mandatory course must have agency and license law in it and fair housing. I mean, obviously our course has fair housing.
I feel strongly because I think this will stop the confusion. Do I have enough? Is this course enough for me to satisfy my mandatory? So I think that would be great. And then I won't let you wait till May. So we'll have a special meeting for it. All right.
Excuse me, can I ask a question? Can we as a real estate commission direct that we just have one course rather than what we're talking about, these multiple identifications? Can we do that as a real estate commission?
I don't think we can. I think Ryan discussed that.
Yeah, based on how the statute's written, we can't. So you'd have to change the
Yeah.
statute.
That's correct. All right. Anything else anyone wants to discuss? We're going to save this for next meeting on it, but maybe give you a heads up on. There is a lot of things going on regarding these companies buying houses, putting them on the market, almost like a straw, and not really owning these properties. So it's something we're gonna have to look into a little bit, whether it's legal enough. I'm gonna talk to legal about it first and see if it is legal what they're doing. We've all seen it in multiple listings where these companies are not the owners. Okay, they call themselves the seller, but they're not really the seller at the time of marketing. So I've got to get, this is getting out of hand here.
Are you talking about a practice that I've seen it on social media called wholesaling, where, you know, you basically lock it in a contract, never close, and you put it on as if you're the seller?
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's called a lot of things, you know, it all comes out to the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, they're going to close, they put it on the market in February, and they're closing with the seller, well, with the owner, they call it, okay, in September. There's that at a certain price. It's just, somebody really is getting, so it's something we should be looking into it, getting worse. And it's very confusing to the public. Who is the seller? Who is the owner of this property? Misleading. Because if there are multiple listings, you'll see that the owner, okay, of record is signing the seller disclosure. But yet they're saying, they have an addendum saying he really not the seller. We're going to be the seller. So it's a confusion. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sharon.
No, it's very confusing to the agents too. Like, who are we dealing with? There's it's, you know, I've been involved in one with a client who was approached by one of these brokers who, you know, said they were buying the house for X number of dollars. And then, but, oh, you have to be ready to show your house. The contract had $1,000 deposit, home inspections 2 months out. It was, you know, I think legal, it's something I would request that legal start to look into.
Then the question is this, you know, Sharon, if somebody calls on that particular property, okay, for example, as a buyer, so now who is this person representing? You follow me? He's the seller. He's representing the owner. He's representing himself. I mean, come on, you can't do it all.
Right. So I think it just is something that really needs to get looked into. You know, it's a little shady, to say the least.
Well, they're taking these courses, how to own property and buy property without buying it. You know, that's really what it comes out to.
It reminds me of ticket scalping, and which is, you know, it is, but it seems like it's even less regulated than the ticket scalping.
Yeah. So there's somewhere to look into it and discuss also. All right. Anything else? With that, then we're going to adjourn the meeting.
I'm sorry. Julianne had sent us something last night that we were supposed to discuss today. She sent the proposed legislation, I think, changes. And there had been modifications to that document. Are we supposed to discuss that today?
Do we have it all? Did you receive it?
I received it, but no time to review it.
Okay.
And there were 52 pages. So it's, I mean, again, no time.
It's pretty much a standard change, removing the term broker and substituting other language for it. So it's just pretty much consistent throughout the whole, all those pages.
They removed the verbiage about having to have documentation to show houses.
Yeah, and they removed a section 7 and didn't change the numbers after that either.
No, I'm saying there was a substantive change though.
Okay.
I understand that there was like clerical changes and verbiage or definitional changes. That's fine, but there was a substantive change.
You mean the section 7? Removal of it?
Yeah, there was a whole room. I don't know what the number was.
Julie,
But
it was 7.
You want to discuss that?
Sure. Yes, that's why I'm here today. I did not expect everyone to go through things with a fine-tooth comb, although, you know, as you saw, we did keep it in red line, so hopefully it was easier to kind of see where the changes were. As you noted, one non-substantive change was changing, well, actually, before I go through all of the specific changes, let me just explain how we got here. So CTR had a meeting with their members to get feedback as to what was, based on what we provided, any issues, red flags that generally their members, where they had concerns. So there were a few areas that were of note. Based on this, CTR came back to us, and then we worked through, had conversations about what would fit into the structure in a way that wouldn't make substantive changes after what, we've extensively gone through this with the board. And then, got to this draft, which has now been submitted, or the revisions are being submitted in for replacement language for the legislation moving forward. So let me just outline briefly kind of what was changed. One thing was changing responsible broker to supervising licensee. That was non-substantive. It was just a matter of the members that the word broker shows up too much. And so we're getting confused by which broker you're referring to. So we changed the terminology entirely. Designated broker also was not a substantive change. It was just making clear in there that it is the individual, the human who is responsible for the business entity, the business brokerage entity. Some of the substantive changes, though, that were in there was one, changing the hour requirements for a salesperson to become a broker. It's only changing in substance in terms of the language that was there before wasn't syncing up with practice in either licensing at DCP or in how CTR and the commission had been applying the requirements. So the language actually said you could have 1,500 hours of salesperson experience at any time during the last 3 years. So if I wanted to do the 1,500 hours in 1 year, I could be a salesperson for 1 year and then apply to be a broker. This is not what the practice was, nor apparently was the intent when that legislation was changed a couple of years ago. The intent was to have it be 3 years. And during that 3-year period, you had to have a minimum of 1,500 hours. So we are now making sure that language is clear in the statute to make sure that that is actually not only the practice, but also what's prescribed. We did take out the language related to when a disclosure or when a representation agreement is required with a buyer or seller, because what we found is that there is not consensus in the industry over this in general. We saw this with the commission generally, we saw this with CTR, that this is a very hot button issue for realtors in the state of what that specific period or what specific time is that the agreement needs to be executed. So based on that, and based on the fact that the language had kind of been whittled down to the point where it wasn't clear when that time period was, and we weren't creating a very bright line rule, and we're basically punting it to the future saying that DCP will write regs, we decided to take it out all entirely, because if we're going to deal with this in regs, we already have the authority in statute to deal with it in regs. By putting in a section that just says, yeah, we're going to deal with it in the future in regs, and adding something vague in there, we don't need more vague references in statute. So we're not saying, by taking that language out, we're not saying we're not going to deal with it in regs. We just already have that authority, and we can absolutely proceed forward to prescribe the policy there. So the other big things, or two other things that we had changed. One was taking out the members at CTR were quite vocal about not liking the idea of having someone have their commission paid out to someone who is not a licensee. So we had put in there before that you could have your commission paid to a to any business entity that is solely owned by you. So I individually as a salesperson would typically receive my commission, but I wanted it to be paid to Julianne Avalone LLC, registered with the Secretary of State for tax purposes. We're saying that is not okay now, removing that language so that it's going to be just as it is under current law. We're not adding in that exception to allow for that separate transfer of funds. The concern with licensees was that it could be paid to an unrelated business entity, and that you just wouldn't necessarily know where those funds are being paid, and also that the brokerage or the broker, even if it was an individual, wouldn't have the ability to say, no, I don't want those funds to go to that LLC. I want it to go specifically to the salesperson. And the last change that was made was related to the leasing agents. And the leasing agent language previously read that you could either work for a developer, which is that large, real estate entity that has at least 50 units or more in that one property that you'd be working at as the leasing agent. Or the other route to becoming a leasing agent was to be licensed under a broker. There was concern expressed from CTR members that in the event the leasing agents were working for brokers, that it might undermine the salesperson credential, and that brokers might wind up using those leasing agents for work outside the Sorry, I heard comments. Was there a question? Okay. And so with that, since initially the concern that we raised and the problem we were trying to solve was for those large developments that had hundreds of units, and you had Susie who sits at the front desk and just signs leases all day long. That was the problem we were trying to address, not as much whether there was leasing agent capacity in brokers or associated with brokers, because brokers and salespeople can already do that. We had agreed, and we had spoken with Chairman Castangoy to be able to say, is this something that is a major concern? It didn't seem like anyone was really wed to having that, building that capacity in brokerage businesses. And so we took that avenue out. Now, and if this is something, if leasing agents wind up being the bee's knees going forward, and the real estate industry winds up wanting to bring those in, have that capacity for brokers, to hire leasing agents directly, we can deal with it in a future session. But right now, this seemed to be a good way to address the current problem and dip our toe in the water. So yes, I appreciate, I wanted you guys to have the revised bill so that you had the most current language, but we didn't expect you to read the full document last night. So I appreciate that. Linda?
So not that we're going to have this presented to us again, Julianne, but in the future, if we have multiple pages, i.e. with this 52 pages, an extrapolation, we could get the 52 pages, but an extrapolation of the most important highlights, which you just went through, would be appreciated so that we could be prepared. If we have any questions, we could review it, think about our questions, and then as you present it, we can ask. So in the future, if that could be done, that would be appreciated.
It will, yes. Thank you. So procedurally from here, we expect, Amy?
You might be answering the question. So my question is I haven't ever been through the reg revision process. So what does that entail and how does that work? If we want to add things through regs versus statute.
So, but what I sent out yesterday was statute. So
Correct.
Okay. Well, let me do first let me answer the statutory process question, and then I'll switch over to regs.
Yep.
So in terms of the statute, at this point, the bill was called last week, the week before that. The bill has been called already. So it is now being considered by the committee. It is going to go from here to a public hearing. At the public hearing, and we'll let you guys know when that's happening. I do not have a date yet. We would appreciate your support. This is a huge undertaking. This is a huge accomplishment that we've got this language to this point. We've been talking for a long time about updating the Real Estate Act. 50 plus pages of legislation going through all at once, doing comprehensive changes is not common. So, again, if we encourage the commission members to testify or provide written testimony in support of the bill if possible. We'll let you know when that happens. From there, we will be, that's kind of when the horse trading starts. Typically after the public hearing, you will get comments from realtors, I'm sure, salespersons, throughout the state who are going to have some feedback on our bill. You're going to probably see substitute language proposed, and we will, we'll do our best to, although things are going to come rapidly throughout session, we'll do our best to keep you guys apprised of any major changes that are proposed that are going to be incorporated into the bill. It is unlikely that what I sent last night is going to look the same at the end of session. Just throwing that out there. Basically, it is rare that any of our bills that we put out that are more than a page or two come back looking the same when they're, signed off by the governor at the end. So, but we'll keep you guys abreast of that. What we did is that we are very hopeful that, a version close to this is going to pass. And so we actually brought on an intern this week who's going to be working with us on the regulations. So session ends this year on June 7th. So in anticipation of a bill passing at that time, we have an intern who started with us. She is a law student with some experience over at the legislature. And she's going to be taking a first crack at drafting the regulations and being able to get the changes that are in the statute reflected in not only current regs, but writing new language that needs to be incorporated based on the changes that we did. So for example, if anything needs to be put in regs related to leasing agents don't exist in the regs right now. So in terms of regs, we won't put them through until the end of session, just because it doesn't make sense. We won't know what the words are that we have to update until we know what bill is passed. But we are starting drafting them now because we have a general idea of what it's going to look like. So the regs process is a lengthy process. I can actually send out we have kind of an outline of how it goes throughout the system. It goes from consumer protection to the governor's office. The governor's office signs off, or governor's council, the Office of Policy Management signs off. It comes back to us. We have to then put it out for public comment for at least 30 days. It comes back to us. We have to create a bunch of forms, send it over to the Attorney General's office. They have 30 days to review it. They send it back to us. From there, we send it over to the Legislative Commissioner's office, and they will then review the documents, and then approximately 2 months after we sent it over to the Legislative Commissioner's office, it goes on the agenda for the Regulation Review Committee over at the legislature. They are not tied to session. It doesn't matter if it's in session or after session. They meet throughout the year. They meet monthly throughout the year. And then ideally, we'll provide them with such a perfect document that they will approve. And then it'll come back to us, make any technical revisions they may have, and then we'll submit it over to the Secretary of State to have it published. What may happen is if the committee has substantive questions, they do fairly often reject without prejudice. And then in the Chutes and Ladders world, we get knocked back to the point where we have to revise it, send it back to the Attorney General's office, get it back, and then go through the Legislative Commissioner's office back to regulation review.
Which committee is it starting in?
So it's only Regulation Review Committee. It's the only committee that touches it.
No, the legislative committee before it goes to regs review.
There is
Who's
no
going to hold
legislative
the
committee.
public hearing?
So not for regs. Regs is all agencies until it gets to, well, it's agencies in the Attorney General's office, until it gets to the Regulation Review Committee. It does not need to be called as a bill or vetted through public hearing at the legislature. It is just public comment that the agency holds.
So it's going directly through Red's review. It's not going through a legislative committee at all then.
Well, the Regs Review Committee is a bipartisan committee that is.
I'm familiar with that, but I mean, it's not going to go to any legislative committee. It's going directly to Regs Review.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not going to the Insurance and Real Estate Committee first?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Linda, you had a question? No, your hand's up. Amy, your hand's up.
Yeah, actually, so I just wanted to follow up on that. So since we had, quite a bit of discussion about buyer agency and paperwork and that sort of thing. So are we going to have a similar discussion and it seemed important to most of the commissioners about that. So it ends up in the proposed regulations?
Again,
I mean, my concern is it's been struck from the statute language because CTR feels that people don't follow the practice, but it has been an advised policy from DCP, from the commission, since the early 2000s when buyer agency came about. So, and I mean, maybe the commission has to have internal discussions about whether we still think it's important or not that this paperwork be signed. But it seems like I just don't want it to be forgotten since it's been a policy for so long. That's all. And I know a policy is not enforceable. So that's the problem we're facing.
Well, it's not the policy, it's the law that says, it's upon negotiation. So it's really a matter of how strong case we feel when we're prosecuting cases, well, like in terms of enforcement actions that are brought to us and the timeliness in which these representation agreements are being executed. So, that is, it's the current law in terms of how it's applied by DCP. Now, what I will say is that since we couldn't come up with a bright line rule for when specifically, like making it very clear for when these representation agreements have to be executed, I think the takeaway for us is that there's bigger industry buy-in needed. We need more people at the table so that it doesn't get killed. And then, because realistically, if we had put this in this with vague language, the whole bill would have been killed. And so this is not a hill that DCP is going to die on, because we certainly see the merits from both sides of the table. And yet we do think it's important to be able to have clear guidance clear law that is then communicated out to the members of the industry. But there's so much internal debate as to what that proper bright line is and how we inform people to walk the path that, I don't know how we necessarily procedurally get more of the real estate brokers and salespersons out there at the table to have a conversation with the commission. But we're certainly open to facilitating those conversations in any way we can to be able to do this. Because you're right, this isn't something that's going away. This is going to be a perennial issue that is important to tackle.
No, I think it's going to go away. So I'll just get myself to accept that it's going to go away, because I think that's what we're going to see.
But it's something that I've been hearing since I started at DCP. So there's certainly interest out. There's interest, but not consensus. And so the question has to be how we get to at least greater consensus. I don't think you're ever going to get everyone on board with one path or the other, but
it seemed like who you talk to, how they interpret it. But anyhow, this has been going on for some time. Is Cindy still on? I just gotta. Cindy, can you hear me? Cindy? Cindy
She
Buck?
is here. I'm just gonna unmute her.
Okay. Cindy?
Yeah,
Regarding your course, just one sec. Are you gonna resubmit that course to us? We talked about.
what I need to find out from Ryan and Julianne is if it's required that agency be in every mandatory course or not. So I just need to, I would resubmit it if it's required to have certain elements that our course is missing.
Okay.
But I would also suggest that the existing course might need to be reviewed as well, if there are required elements for a mandatory course.
So, Ryan, I don't know if you want to speak to this.
Again, I'll defer to you if you have other comments, but what I would, at first, I would defer to the commission because the commission is the ultimate authority on what the contents of the course are. It has that.
No, but does the statute require certain elements?
Again, the commission can go beyond that as the statute and regs are written. So,
So right now, again, it's the mandatory course and regulation, and it's not inside in the regulation, and as it's posted on our website, is that it's one course, that's 3 hours, and it has to be in real estate, fair housing legislation, licensing laws, and regulation. So now, what I'm hearing from you guys is that you had, because it says unless otherwise mandated by the Real Estate Commission. So what I'm gathering from our conversation today is that the Real Estate Commission says, instead of teaching that one class for 3 hours in real estate, fair housing legislation, licensing laws, and regulations, that at some point that this commission voted to replace that course with a course on agency law. Is that correct?
Julianne, the course only has 25 minutes of agency law.
That's not my question right now, Cindy. The question is that in terms of what the commission voted on, because unless there was a very clear resolution by the committee or commission that says we are going to be replacing the mandatory course that's written out in regulation with a mandatory and replacing that with a course on agency law, then it's still what's existing out there. So it just needs to be, and I want to keep reading it because it's just long, but it's really, again, very vague. Current real estate and fair housing legislation, licensing laws and regs. So,
well, why don't we get the vote that we took on that?
Do you remember when that vote was taken?
I don't.
No, we approved that.
I believe the course was approved at the last meeting we had because I was not at that meeting. So I don't know when that was, October, November.
November.
I think that was the meeting when it was approved.
Jen or Jay, actually, I guess I should have it in here. Let me just make sure I have oh, here we go. I have the minutes from November. So in the November meeting, there was a mandatory course slideshow review. Now, that is, so it says that you approve the 2023-24 mandatory course, but I'm not sure what that means. To me, it looks like there was a specific course that was considered. Is that true?
When we had a meeting separately, and after we went through the whole meeting on it, we approved it then at that time, if I remember right.
So the board had a special meeting to considered what the mandatory course overview was going to be?
I'm not sure, but I know we approved it. It had to be approved.
So there would need to be a resolution drafted, you know, and approved by the commission that would say, this is going to be in lieu of the course required in regulation. This is what we're going to require as the 1 3-hour course. And here's the subject matter. And so until that's done, and then it also needs to be, we need to provide that to the general public. Like on our website right now, it doesn't say anything about the mandatory course being agency law. It says that description that I was reading before. So that's where I think it's going to be important to be able to educate the public. So Cindy, to answer your question currently, no, if they have agency law in there for 25 minutes, that's fine, because the only requirement is that it's current real estate legislation, licensing law, and regulations. So agency law would be in there.
So, or if you don't have agency law, it could still comply. Because obviously you can't teach a course on everything related to license laws. And it doesn't say how much of your course needs to include license law and regs. Or if you can or can't include other things within the 3 hours.
Just says 3 hours of, it's related to law though. That's what it is, like real estate, fair housing law, like legislation, licensing laws and regulations. So it's really, it's like how the law would apply into the field, presumably. But that's the only guidance provided in regulation at this point. So,
and you're right, Cindy, there's no time for each.
Linda, you had your hand up? Oh, you're on mute. You're still on mute.
She's muted. Cindy, you're muted.
It wasn't me, it was Linda.
Sorry, there seems to be a lot of confusion, obviously, on this. And I think it needs to be resolved so we can move forward on what's mandatory, what isn't, what did we decide, what didn't we decide. So I would suggest that we table this to the special meeting we're going to have, Ben, or whenever you feel it's appropriate, so that we can get this resolved. Obviously there needs to be some research done, and we're just kind of going around in a circle right now, it appears to me. So that's my suggestion.
But just to note though, what the impact would be of tabling the discussion at this point is that there is not the continuing education course that's mandated is not agency law specific. It is, again, on real estate laws, as I kept on, reading the description. So it is a very broad, it would cover a breadth of courses. The department will not have a basis for denying a course on, interpreting advertising regulations for brokers.
I like well, let's see if we can find, I'm on the assumption the department went ahead with that course if it wasn't approved by us, because that's the final approval. So there's going to be something in the middle somewhere of that approval.
I'm sorry, Chairman, I can't hear you, unfortunately, so.
And when we have to find someplace in the minutes where we did approve that course.
It's still, it's too faint. I don't know if anyone else can hear him, that if it's a
Yes, what
question.
he's saying is we have to find it in the minutes where we did or did not approve that course. What did we approve?
Oh.
And I don't know how we can go forward, even unless I'm misunderstanding you. I'm not sure how we can go forward without having that answer.
Okay. Let me just share my screen for a second. So this is what was approved in November. It's number 2 here. This was at the last meeting. So I think Does anyone remember who put on the slideshow?
Was it UConn? I can't recall.
So if it was UConn for their mandatory course that they created, that was
Right.
approved, then that is just one specific course. That is not the board deciding the overarching, course in general, the course subject. So
Well, who was on the agenda for that meeting?
I think up top, let's see.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't there because I had a funeral that day, so I did not attend that meeting, but it was my understanding that Kristen probably
Yep.
managed the
UConn.
presentation.
Yeah.
So it looks like, yeah. The continuing education 2023-2024 mandatory course slideshow review. And it said commission advanced move to approve the 2023 mandatory course.
The way that it reads, you approved a specific.
So it was approved back then, yeah.
Again, it was approving a specific course, not approving the general replacement of what's required in regs and supplanting it with a specific subject matter that you want all mandatory courses to comply with.
Mhm.
I understood it to be that we approved that as a mandatory course for this cycle. It's that simple. We approved that course as being.
The commission can't require all the other providers to just approve the UConn course. It is that course providers can come in and apply for courses based on the subject matter that is set forth in regulation. So you have basically, by approving that course, said that that course adequately relates to real estate laws in the state of Connecticut, which is that category that's currently in regulation. But fair housing laws are also related to real estate laws, or real estate laws. So you could say that that also would satisfy the mandatory courses under the broader category that's in regs, until the real estate commission would say, no, the course needs to specifically be this rather than this broader real estate laws category. It has to be voted on as a kind of that umbrella, and then different course providers can come in, because otherwise, if you said it's only that UConn course, then UConn could say, well, we're not sharing our curriculum, that's our course. You have to create your own thing. And then they would have a monopoly on courses in the state, which we cannot create. Or there's really, it's just mainly that there's no basis for it in law.
Yeah. But if the course was approved.
Yes, the course specifically was approved. I agree with that. It is that the category of courses, so
I we understand that it's open. It's called open to the schools. And they have to bring their course in, and then we have to approve it. No different than we did to UConn. Am I correct?
Sorry, Linda, could you repeat that again? Sorry.
Yeah, the way I understood it, and I'm sorry, was I interrupting you? Was that we approved that course, that it fulfilled the mandatory requirement, and it could be used as a mandatory requirement. We didn't eliminate anybody else. I thought we were just approving that course, that it fulfilled the requirement for this session.
Yes, but the requirement that it met. So you're right, you approved that singular course, but you are approving that course because it met the requirement of a course that consisted of real estate and fair housing legislation, licensing laws, and regulations. not that it was a course that met agency law, the specific agency law classification. Because there was no vote prior to that that required the minimum course to be specifically on agency law. That's what's missing.
I need to ask a general question, and excuse my ignorance if I'm not following this whole thing. And I'm not part of the education subcommittee. I just don't understand why we as a department can't write the course and then have whatever is in that course as an expectation of what schools submit. And if they don't submit the entirety of what we have requested as part of our course curriculum, that we deny them. Why do we have to approve them when they submit whatever they submit? Half of what we have decided is appropriate and half they don't. Am I confused here? I don't get it.
So if the board votes to set forth a kind of an outline for what needs to be in there. So for example, Cindy was asking before, is 25 minutes enough of agency law in a 3-hour course? If the board votes that big picture, we're saying the mandatory course has to be agency law. It needs to be at least 2 of the 3 hours has to be focused on agency law. It needs to cover XYZ topics. That's perfectly reasonable. The idea though that there's one prescribed course that's set forth by either the department, I mean, and actually I don't know if it's by the board. So we don't create courses because we also approve them at the department level. Like it is not our mandate to be able to create courses. The board has the authority to provide that substance.
Then I guess that's what I'm saying. We should be providing that substance, in my opinion, of what we want in that, not have the schools dictate to us what they're going to teach to our associates, to our agents.
You can certainly set forth an L. I think I would caution, and we'll have to go back and look at it, but I would caution against creating the entire course. But if you wanted to set forth what specific, like be able to give more guidance as to what is required.
In a general school system situation, there's a curriculum decided by the Board of Education. Okay, the teachers must follow within that curriculum outline that the Board of Education. So think of us as the commission is the Board of Education, and then the schools must adhere to the limitations of that curriculum. That is what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's not unprecedented in terms of what you see currently in, let me see if I share my screen again, in regulation. I don't know if I can possibly make this big enough for you to see. Okay, there we go. So for example, in here for course content, we're with CEs right now. So you say generally accepted courses include very specific things, security and syndications, taxes and liens, title closings, things like that. So, you know, you can certainly prescribe certain things. And again, this is where I keep looking at the, you have the mandated course unless otherwise directed by the real estate. And that's where you get the 3 hours.
That's what I'm talking about.
So this is where it's vague, but you can certainly say, we're going to otherwise direct that it has to be agency law with this number of hours of the 3, or all 3 have to be on agency law. Like however you're going to, but it needs to be very clearly voted upon. So all course providers know what rules they're working within. It needs to be put on our website. Like it needs to be published in a way that, you know, everyone's working in the same playbook. Brenda, or I think Brenda was up before Amy.
Yes, my name is Brenda Milholm. I'm an instructor in Connecticut. I just want to ask this commission if you would consider having those of us that are instructors assist or be on a task force to assist with some of these topics. I think that it outstretches the commission who don't teach the courses to just have these kind of conversations without asking us who are in the industry what things are pertinent. And I would like to be one of those people if you do such a thing. That's all I have to say. I just feel that I'd like to ask you guys to include some instructors in your conversation.
There are a number of instructors on that task force.
All right, but they're hand-picked. They're not all that. They're not instructors that everyone wants to go to their courses. So I'm just asking you to look a little further. And you
Brenda,
can,
I'd also
fine.
like to, there are a number of us who are also practicing agents, real estate agents on this
No,
commission.
I know. No, I understand that, and most of you are. I'm not saying that. However, we're instructors. We do this day in and day out, and I think there's a level of that is missing from some of the discussions at the commission level. That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking for you to change all that you do. Just look a little bit further outside of the box and see if you can include some other people that might have other ideas. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I think we had 4 instructors on that committee this past cycle.
That's right.
And 2 of them were new to me. So I think, we had included other people, and I don't know who picks who's on that task force or not, but there were, and that was part of, they were the ones who gave most of the feedback. So about how things would be taught in class and subject matter and that. So
And the time they need, right, and the time they need.
Yeah.
For each subject.
All right. So the question I have is, last year in the fall, I guess, when we approved the other class as the other mandatory class taught by another instructor, we at that point determined that we weren't following the statute properly. And, we really needed to revise some things and relook at some things. So I guess I'm confused as to how come this cycle, the committee that came up with the class that was approved, I guess why this wasn't set forth at the beginning from legal or whoever it should be to establish, this is what you need to be doing based on our current interpretation of the statute.
I can answer that. I believe I think it was just a matter of timing as far as when these issues were discovered versus when that curriculum was being developed. These conversations are fairly recent as far as conversations with new faculty and new staff over at UConn, as well as staff here at DCP. So I think it's just a matter of timing.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, so I think at this moment, we're going to meet, review the course, the 2 courses that are asked to be approved, one from CTR and the other one is from, the appraisal course. I think if the appraisal course is supposed to be approved for mandatory, I mean, it's called an appraisal course. We have to make sure that it does have all the substance in there that we need to have as a mandatory course. Any other questions for that? Okay. Anybody want to bring up anything? Okay, we'll adjourn. Thank you.
See you guys next time.